My father looked me in the eye and called me a disgrace. I was 15 years old. My mother had been dead for 3 days. Her clothes were still hanging in the closet. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand. The house still smelled like her. And my father, the man whose last name I carried, the man who was supposed to protect me, pointed at the front door and told me to get out. He said I reminded him too much of her. He said having me around was too painful. He said I was on my own now. I was 15. I had nowhere to go. I had nothing. And 10 years later, he walked through the front doors of my company in a suit with a resume in his hand, asking my receptionist if the CEO was available for a meeting. My receptionist called me. She said, "Zara, there's a gentleman here. He says his name is Raymond Coleman. He says he's your..." I said, "I know who he is." I told her to put him in the conference room, and I took 5 minutes in my office, just 5 minutes, to become the version of myself I had worked 10 years to be. Then I walked in. Before I go any further, drop a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country, wherever you are in the world tonight. I want to see you. I will be reading every single one. And if nobody has said this to you lately, you are still standing, and that matters more than you know. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Zara Coleman. I am 26 years old. I am the founder and CEO of a brand consulting firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I have 12 full-time employees, a client list I am genuinely proud of, and a corner office with a window that looks out over a city that never once handed me anything. I took everything I have, and the first person who taught me I would have to was my father. His name is Raymond Coleman. He is 53 years old. He is, or was, a financial analyst. He remarried 2 years after my mother died. He had 2 more children, a boy and a girl, both of whom he raised in the house I grew up in. He did not look for me, not once in 10 years, until the company found him first. This is that story, and I am going to tell it to you the way it actually happened. Not the cleaned-up version, not the made-for-television version. The real one, with the parts that hurt and the parts that still make me shake my head slowly and think, God, the audacity. Stay with me, because the ending is worth every second of this. I need to tell you about my mother first, because nothing that comes after makes sense without her. Her name was Vivian Coleman. She went by Viv to everyone who loved her, and everyone loved her. That was just the kind of person she was. She was a high school English teacher for 17 years. She taught at West Side High in Atlanta, and she was the kind of teacher students came back to visit years later, the kind who showed up at graduations and remembered every name. She was sharp and funny, and she had this way of telling a story, this particular way, where she paused at exactly the right moment and looked at you like she was letting you in on a secret. I used to sit on the kitchen counter while she cooked dinner just to watch her talk. I could have listened to her for hours. She loved books, she loved bad reality television with zero shame, she loved yellow tulips, specifically yellow, she made the best jollof rice in a 50-mile radius, and absolutely everyone who ate it agreed. She was my best friend. She got sick when I was 13. Breast cancer, caught late. They said they caught it at stage 3. She went through chemo, went through radiation, went through everything they put in front of her with the kind of stubbornness that I think she passed directly into my DNA. For 2 years, I watched my mother fight, and for 2 years, I believed with every cell in my body that she was going to win. She didn't. She passed on a Thursday in October, just after midnight. I was in the hospital room. I was holding her hand. I was 15 years old, and I did not let go for a long time after. I remember everything about that room. The sound of the machines going quiet, the way the light looked, the weight of the blanket over her hand, the nurse who came in and didn't say anything, just stood there with us for a minute, and that silence was one of the kindest things anyone did for me in that entire period. I remember thinking, I actually remember the thought forming very clearly. Okay, you still have your father, you still have the house, you still have your life. You are going to be okay. I held on to that thought for exactly 3 days. My father was not a warm man. I want to be fair. He was not cruel in the obvious ways. He didn't yell much, he wasn't violent, but there was a coldness to him that I had always felt, even as a small child, like there was a thermostat inside him set a few degrees lower than it was in everyone else. My mother was the warmth in our house. She was the one who remembered birthdays and packed lunches with notes inside and stayed up late when I couldn't sleep. My father provided. He worked, he paid bills, he kept the structure standing. But the love, the actual warmth and presence of love, that was her. When she died, the warmth went with her. I didn't understand at 15 just how much she had been running interference, how much of my father's distance she had been buffering, smoothing over, translating into something livable. I didn't understand that until she was gone, and there was nothing between me and the cold anymore. The first 2 days after the hospital, my father barely spoke. He handled arrangements, phone calls, the funeral home, the paperwork. I didn't take that personally. I understood that people grieve differently. I tried to stay out of his way. I cleaned the kitchen, I did the laundry, I tried to be useful and invisible at the same time, the way a child does when they sense something dangerous in the air and don't quite know what it is. On the 3rd day, he came into the living room where I was sitting. He stood in the doorway for a moment without saying anything, and then he said, "This isn't going to work." I looked up. I said, "What?" He said, "You, being here, I can't do this, Sarah. Every time I look at you, I see her. You look exactly like her. You sound like her. I can't be in this house with you," and he stopped. He looked at the wall instead of at me. He said, "I can't do it." I thought he was going to say he needed some time. I thought he was going to say he was going to stay somewhere else for a while to clear his head. I was already making space in my mind for that, already telling myself it was grief, it was shock, it would pass. He said, "I've called your Aunt Patricia. She knows you're coming. I need you to pack what you need tonight." I did not move. I said, "Tonight?" He said, "It's better this way." I said, "Dad," and something in my voice cracked on that word, cracked in a way I had not let it crack since the hospital, because I had been holding myself together very carefully, and the word "Dad" undid something. He looked at me then, for just a moment, and I want to be honest with you, I don't know what I saw in his face. It wasn't nothing, but whatever it wasn't enough to stop him. He said, "You'll be fine. You're strong like she was." And then he turned around and went upstairs. That was it. He called me strong in the same breath he threw me out. And I have thought about that specific combination of words more times than I can count, because that is a particular kind of cruelty, using someone's strength as the reason you don't have to show up for them. "You'll be fine" is something people say when they need you to be fine, so they don't have to be responsible for you. I packed a bag. I was not fine. But I was 15, and I had no choice. And the last thing I did before I left that house, I went to my mother's nightstand and I took her reading glasses. Just the glasses, nothing else. They were hers and they smelled like her, and nobody was going to stop me from taking them. I still have them. If you felt that, if something in that story touched something in you, hit that like button right now. I mean it. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. And if you're new here, subscribe. Every week, real stories, the kind that don't let you look away. Now let me tell you what happened at Aunt Patricia's and what happened after that, because this is where I start to become who I am. Aunt Patricia was my mother's younger sister. She lived across town in a 3-bedroom house with 2 teenage boys of her own and a schedule that was already stretched past its limit. She was a nurse. She worked 12-hour shifts. She was kind, genuinely kind, but kind has limits when your resources do too. She took me in because she loved her sister and because she was not the kind of woman who could have said no, but I felt from the first week that I was one more weight on a scale already tipping. I want to be clear, she never made me feel unwanted. She never said a cruel word. She fed me and housed me and signed my school forms and showed up to things she was exhausted to attend. What she could not give me was what I actually needed, which was someone to fall apart with, someone who was also destroyed by losing Vivian and sit in that destruction with me. Aunt Patricia was surviving too. We were all just trying to get to the other side. So I decided, at 15 years old, in a twin bed in a house that wasn't mine, that I was going to make myself impossible to ignore. Not in a way that required attention, in a way that required results. I went back to school the week after my mother died. Teachers looked at me with that particular tilt of the head, the soft-eyed, careful look that adults give grieving children, and I sat in every class, and I took every note, and I turned in every assignment. Not because I felt like it, because the only thing I knew how to do with devastation was to build something with it. My mother had always said, and she said it the way she said everything important, like she was putting it somewhere inside you where it would live. Baby, the world will give you every reason to fold. Don't give it the satisfaction. I did not fold. Junior year, I had a 4.0 GPA. I was running the school newspaper. I had a part-time job at a bakery on weekends. I was saving money. Not a lot, but deliberately, in a notebook where I tracked every dollar in and every dollar out, because I understood viscerally that money was the difference between having options and having none. Senior year, I applied to 7 colleges. I got into 5. I accepted a partial scholarship to Georgia State to study marketing and business communications. My father did not call when I got in. He did not call when I graduated high school. He did not call when I started college. I checked every time. I do not know why I kept checking. Grief does strange things to your expectations, but I kept half listening for a call that never came. I want to tell you about college, but not the way people usually tell college stories. I am not going to tell you it was full of magic and growth and finding myself, because it was mostly full of working. I worked at a cafe near campus 25 hours a week. I ate a lot of peanut butter sandwiches. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates who became my family, Keisha and Dominique, both of whom are still in my life today and both of whom I will protect with my life until I die. What I found in college was not myself, exactly. I already knew who I was. What I found was a language for what I could do. I took a brand strategy elective my sophomore year because it fit my schedule. I sat down in that class, and within 20 minutes, I knew I had found my thing. Because branding, at its core, is about this: taking something real, something with genuine value, and making the world see it the way it deserves to be seen. I thought about my mother, teaching for 17 years, changing lives in a school that never paid her what she was worth. I thought about how many people in this world do extraordinary things in underpaid, undervalued rooms while the world walks past without noticing. I wanted to be the person who made the world stop and notice. I built my first client relationship at 20, a small natural hair care brand run by a woman named Celestine out of her garage in Decatur. She had an incredible product and a website that looked like it was built in 2003, and no idea how to reach the people who needed what she made. I rewrote her brand story, redesigned her visual identity as a class project. She used it. Within 8 months, her sales had tripled. She referred me to 2 other small business owners. Word travels in small business circles like wildfire. By the time I graduated at 22, I had 6 clients, a reputation I had built from zero, and enough revenue to register Coleman Creative Consulting as an LLC on the same day I got my degree. My Aunt Patricia cried at graduation. Keisha and Dominique screamed from the 3rd row. My father was not there. By then, I had stopped checking. I want to say something here, and I want to say it carefully because I mean it carefully. I did not build my company to prove something to my father. I want to be honest about that because I've seen stories where the whole point is revenge, and this is not that, not at its core. I built it because I loved it, because it was mine, because every client whose story I helped tell was a version of my mother, extraordinary, undervalued, deserving of being truly seen. The fact that it also made me someone my father would one day need to stand in front of, that part I won't pretend I didn't enjoy. If you are enjoying this, if this story is holding you, I need you to hit that like button right now and drop a comment. Have you ever built something that made someone who doubted you have to stop and look? Have you ever had a moment where the work said what words never could? Tell me. I read everything in this comment section, every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe right now. Real stories every week. This is exactly what this channel is for. Now, let me tell you about the day I found out about the job posting. I am going to tell you exactly how I found out. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my office going through a stack of applications for a senior account manager position we had posted publicly. My company had grown, 12 employees, a downtown Atlanta address, and clients in 4 states. We had posted the role on LinkedIn and 3 other platforms. Standard stuff. My office manager, a woman named Brianna, who has been with me since year 2 and is absolutely unflappable, knocked on my door and said, "Hey, so there's a resume in this stack that I think you need to see personally." She said it in a particular voice, not alarmed, not dramatic, just careful. The way someone speaks when they're not sure how you're going to react and they want to give you time to land. She slid the resume across my desk. I looked at the name. Raymond Coleman. I looked up at Brianna. She said, "Should I pull it?" I sat with that question for a long moment, and I want you to understand what was happening in me in that moment. Not anger, not the hot rush of emotion you might expect. What I felt was something stranger, something quieter, something that felt almost like the earth leveling under my feet after a very long time of it being uneven. I said, "No, don't pull it. Follow the standard process." Brianna nodded once, the way she does when she's understood something bigger than what was just said, and she left. I read the resume. Raymond Coleman, 53, former senior financial analyst at a firm that I noticed downsized significantly in the past 2 years. A gap in employment of 14 months, the kind of gap that tells a story all by itself. He had not listed family under emergency contacts. He had not, and I looked carefully, made any indication that he knew whose company he was applying to. He had simply seen a job posting at Coleman Creative Consulting and sent in his resume. He had not put it together. My company had my last name on it, and he had not put it together. I thought about that for a long time. And then I thought about my mother's reading glasses still sitting in a small dish on my bookshelf at home, and I thought about a 15-year-old girl with a bag packed at the front door of the house where she grew up. And I decided to let the process play out. He got a callback because his qualifications were genuinely strong. I want to be honest about that. The resume was good. He knew finance, he knew accounts, he had years of relevant experience. Under normal circumstances, he would have moved forward in the process. I let Brianna schedule the initial screening, and then I made a decision. I told Brianna I would sit in on this one personally.
She looked at me. She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Zara." I said, "I'm sure, Brianna." I want to describe that conference room to you because I think about it often. It's a room I designed intentionally. Warm lighting, a long mahogany table, framed campaigns on the walls, client logos that tell the story of what this company has become. It is a room that says, without saying it out loud, this is a real thing that a real person built. I sat at the head of the table. He came in. And I want to tell you what it looked like when a man recognizes his daughter across a conference table he thought was safe. He was already midway through the door, hand extended for a handshake, professional smile, the specific energy of a man who had prepared for a job interview, when he saw my face. He stopped. The color changed in his face. His hand lowered. There was a moment of complete silence in that room, just the hum of the building around us and the two of us looking at each other across a table that I owned. He said, "Zara." Not a question, just my name, like he was confirming that the floor was real. I said, "Hello, Raymond. Please, sit down." He sat. I will give him that. He sat. He didn't leave, and I thought in that moment that maybe he had more in him than I remembered. I said, "I reviewed your resume. You're qualified for the role." He looked at the table. He looked back at me. He said, I didn't know. I didn't realize it was your company." I said, "I know." He said, "Zara, I said, "I'm going to stop you there. Not because I don't want to hear it, but because I want to say something first." And I told him, not in anger, not in tears. I told him calmly, in the voice of someone who has had 10 years to decide exactly how this conversation would go if it ever happened. I told him I was 15 when my mother died. I told him I remembered what the house smelled like the morning I left. I told him about Aunt Patricia and the twin bed and the notebook where I tracked every dollar. I told him about the bakery job and the scholarship and Celestine's hair brand and the 6 clients I had before I graduated. I told him about the 12 people who worked for me who depended on this company to take care of their families. I told him that I did not build this to punish him. I told him that I built this because my mother said not to give the world the satisfaction of watching me fold, and I had taken that instruction very seriously. And then I said, "I want you to know that I am not angry at you, Raymond. I spent a long time being angry, and it was expensive. It cost me sleep, and it cost me peace, and it cost me time I could have been building. So I let it go. Not for you, for me. But I also need you to understand something. That 15-year-old girl at the front door, you made her believe for a long time that she was on her own in the world, and she learned to be okay with that. She learned to be better than okay with that. She built this." He was quiet. I could see something moving in his face that I don't have a clean word for. Not quite shame, not quite pride, not quite grief. Something that looks like all 3 arriving at once and not knowing where to sit. He said, "I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything." I said, "That's true." He said, "I was wrong about everything, about that night, about all of it. I was wrong, and I have known it for a long time, and knowing it and doing something about it are apparently very different things." I looked at him for a long moment. I said, "Yes, they are. I want to tell you what I decided, and I want you to sit with the why before you decide if you agree with it. I did not hire him. I'm going to say that again, clearly. I did not hire Raymond Coleman. Not because I wanted to punish him, not to make a point. I did not hire him because I run a real company with real people who depend on it, and hiring someone because of personal history, in any direction, is not how I run this thing. It would not have been fair to my team, it would not have been fair to the other candidates, and honestly, it would not have been fair to him either. A person cannot begin to actually deal with something when they are employed by the person they wronged. That's not reconciliation, that's complicated. I gave him a list of 3 other firms in Atlanta that I thought were appropriate fits for his background. I wrote a note on each one with a specific contact name. It took me 20 minutes and it cost me nothing. He looked at the list for a long time. Then he looked at me and he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I am not in the business of watching people fail. That was never the point." He nodded slowly. He stood up. He extended his hand, and I shook it. Not for him, not to signal that everything was resolved or forgiven or finished. I shook it because I am Vivian Coleman's daughter, and Vivian Coleman believed that how you treat people is not about what they deserve, it's about who you are. He left. Brianna was at my door before I had been sitting down for a full minute. She looked at my face and she said, "Are you okay?" I thought about it. Actually thought about it. I said, "Yeah. Actually, yeah. I really am." And I meant it. It has been about 4 months since that day in the conference room. My father sent a letter about 6 weeks later. A real letter, written by hand. He apologized. Not in the 3-sentence, "let's move past this" way, in the way that takes up 2 full pages and includes specifics. He mentioned the reading glasses. I do not know how he knew I took them. Maybe he didn't. Maybe it was a guess. But he mentioned them. I read the letter twice. I put it in a drawer. I have not responded yet. I am not ready yet. And I am choosing, for the first time in my life, to operate on my own timeline with no apology to anyone for how long that takes. Here is what I want to say to you, and I'm going to say it as plainly as I know how. The people who leave you are not writing the end of your story. They are only responsible for the chapter they walked out of. The rest of it, all the rest of it, is yours. Your pain is real. Your grief is real. The night someone who was supposed to love you chose themselves over you is real, and it deserves to be called what it was. And also, you can build something extraordinary from the exact rubble they left you in. Not to prove anything to them, not to wait for the moment they walk through your door. Those things may happen, or they may not, and your life cannot hinge on either outcome. You build it because it's yours. You build it because you are your mother's child, or your grandmother's child, or the child of every person who poured something real into you before the world got complicated. You build it because not giving the world the satisfaction of watching you fold is its own form of love. Love for yourself, love for the people who believed in you, love for the version of you that survived what should have broken her. My name is Zara Coleman. I am 26 years old. I run a company. I kept my mother's reading glasses, and I am just getting started. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. Genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being in this with me tonight. I need 3 things from you before you go. 1, drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? And tell me, has someone in your life ever counted you out? Has someone who was supposed to protect you left instead? I want to hear from you. The comment section is yours. I will be reading. 2, hit that like button. If this story moved something in you, if it said something you needed to hear today, let me know. It takes 2 seconds and it helps this reach someone who needs it even more than you do. 3, subscribe. I put out a new story every week. Real women, real lives, real comebacks. You do not want to miss what's coming next. My name is Zara Coleman. My mother's name was Vivian, and we are not finished.